The stray dog was found on a freezing Christmas Eve, but what happened next changed their lives forever. The snow fell in thick, lazy flakes, blurring the already dim lights of the Wisconsin town. Sarah Johnson squinted through the windshield, her tired eyes struggling to pierce the swirling white. It was Christmas Eve, and she was driving home from another late shift at the bakery, her body aching, her mind weary. As she rounded a bend, her headlights caught a small, dark shape huddled by the side of the road. A wave of concern washed over her. Even in her exhausted state, she couldn't ignore a creature in need, especially not on a night like this. Pulling over, she cautiously approached the figure, her boots crunching on the frozen ground. It was a dog, a medium-sized Labrador mix, its fur matted with snow, its body trembling uncontrollably. Its eyes, large and brown, held a desperate plea. Sarah's heart ached. She knew the struggles of being alone and vulnerable, the gnawing fear of facing the world without a safety net. She couldn't leave this creature to the mercy of the freezing night. Gently, she coaxed the dog towards her, speaking in soft, soothing tones. To her relief, it didn't resist. It seemed more scared than aggressive, its tail giving a tentative wag as she wrapped it in her thin coat. "There you go, fella," she murmured, stroking its head. "You're safe now." With the dog bundled in her arms, she returned to her car, her mind racing. She couldn't afford another mouth to feed, not with her already stretched budget. But she couldn't abandon it either. The shelter would be closed for Christmas, and she couldn't bear the thought of leaving it outside in this weather. "Just for tonight," she whispered to the dog as she settled it in the passenger seat. Just for tonight. Driving home, she thought of her children, Emily and Jacob. They had been asking for a dog for years, but she had always resisted. A pet was a luxury they couldn't afford, a responsibility she didn't need. But seeing the joy in their eyes when they saw the dog, well, maybe it wouldn't hurt to let them have a little Christmas magic. As she pulled into the driveway of their small rented house, she could see the warm glow of the Christmas tree through the window. Taking a deep breath, she carried the dog inside, bracing herself for the whirlwind of excitement that was about to unfold. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of warm air and the scent of pine needles. Sarah stepped inside, her arms laden with the shivering dog, and was immediately greeted by a chorus of excited squeals. "Mommy, what is it?" Emily cried, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Is it a present?" Jacob chimed in, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Well, sort of," Sarah replied, carefully placing the dog on the worn rug. "I found him by the side of the road. He was all alone and freezing." The children rushed forward, their faces alight with wonder. Emily, the elder and more cautious of the two, knelt down and gently stroked the dog's head. Jacob, however, threw his arms around the dog's neck, showering it with enthusiastic hugs. "He's so soft," Emily exclaimed, burying her fingers in its fur. "Can we keep him, Mommy? Please," Jacob pleaded, his eyes shining with hope. Sarah hesitated. She had known this was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. "We'll see," she said, trying to sound non-committal. "We need to make sure he's healthy and doesn't belong to anyone." But even as she spoke, she couldn't help but smile. The dog, sensing the children's affection, wagged its tail and licked their faces, eliciting peals of laughter. The atmosphere in the small house, usually subdued with the lingering sadness of their father's absence, was suddenly filled with a vibrant energy. Over the next few days, the dog, whom they quickly named Scar, became an integral part of their little family. Emily, with her nurturing instincts, took charge of feeding and grooming him. Jacob, ever the playful one, spent hours throwing a tattered tennis ball and teaching Scar simple tricks. Even Sarah, despite her initial reservations, found herself growing attached to the gentle creature. Scar, in turn, seemed to thrive in their company. He followed them everywhere, his tail wagging constantly. He slept at the foot of Emily's bed, providing a comforting presence in the quiet hours. He played fetch with Jacob in the snow-covered backyard, his barks echoing through the crisp winter air. But amidst the joy and laughter, Sarah couldn't shake off the nagging worry about their finances. She had already taken on extra shifts at the bakery, but it still wasn't enough. Food, vet bills, and other expenses were adding up, stretching their already tight budget to its limit. One evening, while the children were asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, poring over bills and receipts. A wave of despair washed over her. She loved Scar, and she knew the children adored him, but could they really afford to keep him? As if sensing her distress, Scar nudged her hand with his wet nose, his brown eyes filled with concern. Sarah sighed, stroking his head. "I don't know what to do, Scar," she whispered. "I don't know if we can make this work." But as she looked at the dog, his tail thumping softly against the floor, a glimmer of hope sparked within her. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way. After all, Scar had already brought so much joy into their lives. Perhaps he was the Christmas miracle they had been waiting for. The aroma of gingerbread lingered in Sarah's hair as she returned home from the bakery, a familiar scent that usually brought comfort. But tonight, the sweetness felt cloying, a reminder of the long hours she spent kneading dough and frosting cakes, all to keep their heads above water. Scar, sensing her weariness, greeted her at the door with a gentle whine and a wagging tail. He leaned against her legs, offering silent support. Emily and Jacob, their faces flushed with sleep, emerged from their rooms, their eyes lighting up at the sight of their mother. "Mommy!" Jacob cried, launching himself into her arms. "Did you bring us any treats?" Emily asked, her eyes twinkling mischievously. Sarah managed a tired smile. "Just some day-old bread, sweetie. But I promise to make your favorite cookies tomorrow," as she tucked the children back into bed. Since his accident, the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders, a heavy burden she carried with a quiet stoicism. She often found herself staring at his picture on the nightstand, tracing the lines of his face, remembering his warm smile and the twinkle in his eyes. He would have loved Scar, she thought, a pang of sadness piercing her heart. He would have known how to make ends meet, how to fix the leaky roof, how to chase away the shadows that haunted her. But Mark was gone, and she was left to navigate the complexities of life on her own. She loved her children fiercely, and she was determined to provide them with a stable and loving home. But the constant worry about money, the endless cycle of work and bills, was taking its toll. She found herself snapping at the children more often, her patience wearing thin. She lay awake at night, her mind racing with anxieties, the silence of the house amplifying her loneliness. She missed Mark's comforting presence, his strong arms around her, his reassuring voice whispering in her ear. Scar, sensing her sadness, would often curl up beside her on the couch, resting his head on her lap. His warm body, his steady breathing, offered a sense of solace, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. One afternoon, while Sarah was struggling to fix a clogged drain, her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, stopped by with a plate of freshly baked cookies. Mrs. Peterson, a kind-hearted widow with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor, had been a source of support since Mark's passing. "You look exhausted, dear," Mrs. Peterson said, her eyes filled with concern. "Why don't you let me take care of that? I've got a plunger that can work wonders." As Mrs. Peterson wrestled with the stubborn drain, Sarah confided in her about her financial worries and the challenges of keeping Scar. Mrs. Peterson listened patiently, her hand resting reassuringly on Sarah's arm. "You're a strong woman, Sarah," she said when Sarah had finished. "You've been through so much, but you've always managed to pull through. And don't worry about Scar. He's a blessing in disguise. He's brought joy back into this house." Her words, spoken with such sincerity and compassion, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She wasn't alone in this struggle. There were people who cared, people who wanted to help. And maybe, just maybe, with their support, she could find a way to keep Scar and create a new life for herself and her children. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind of activity in the small town. Festive lights twinkled on snow-laden trees, Carols echoed through the crisp air, and the aroma of gingerbread and hot cocoa filled the streets. Despite her financial worries, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and community spirit. One afternoon, while walking Scar in the park, Sarah noticed a group of children gathered around a makeshift stall, their faces alight with excitement. Curious, she approached the stall and saw a sign that read, "Santa Paws Pet Photos." A jolly-looking man with a white beard and a red suit was posing with a variety of pets, their owners beaming with pride. "Would you like to have Scar's picture taken with Santa?" A young woman with a friendly smile asked Sarah. Sarah hesitated. She couldn't afford any extra expenses, but the sight of the happy pets and their owners tugged at her heartstrings. "How much is it?" she asked tentatively. "It's free," the woman replied. "We're raising money for the local animal shelter. Any donations are welcome, but it's perfectly fine if you can't afford it." Sarah's heart warmed at the woman's generosity. "Thank you," she said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "We'd love to have Scar's picture taken." Scar, ever the charmer, posed patiently with Santa, his tail wagging excitedly. The resulting photo, capturing Scar's goofy grin and Santa's twinkling eyes, became a cherished memento, a reminder of the kindness and generosity of their community. The following week, Sarah received an unexpected invitation to a Christmas potluck dinner hosted by Mrs. Peterson. "I know it's a busy time of year," Mrs. Peterson had said, "but I'd love for you and the children to come. It's a chance to relax, enjoy some good food, and connect with our neighbors." Sarah, hesitant at first, eventually accepted the invitation. She knew the children would enjoy the company of other kids, and she could use a break from her worries. The potluck dinner was a heartwarming affair. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, the aroma of various dishes mingling in the air. Emily and Jacob quickly made friends with the other children, their shyness melting away as they played games and shared stories. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself drawn into conversations with her neighbors, sharing stories about her children, her work at the bakery, and of course, Scar. She was surprised by the warmth and support she received, the genuine concern in their eyes. "You're doing a wonderful job, Sarah," a woman with a kind face told her. "Raising 2 children on your own is no easy feat, especially with all you've been through." Another neighbor, a man with a booming laugh and a friendly demeanor, offered to help with some repairs around the house. "I'm handy with a hammer and nails," he said. "Just let me know if you need anything fixed." As the evening drew to a close, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. She realized that she wasn't alone in this journey. She had a community, a network of people who cared, people who were willing to lend a hand. And with their support, she could face any challenge that came her way. The festive cheer of Christmas gradually faded, leaving behind the stark reality of winter's grip. January brought with it a biting cold that seeped into the bones, and a series of snowstorms that made travel treacherous. For Sarah, the new year also brought a wave of anxieties that threatened to overwhelm her. One evening, as she returned home from work, she found Emily and Jacob huddled on the couch, their faces pale and drawn. Scar, usually a whirlwind of energy, lay listlessly by the fireplace, his head resting on his paws. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, her heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. "Scar's been sick," Emily said, her voice trembling. "He's been vomiting and he won't eat anything." Sarah knelt beside Scar, her hand gently stroking his fur. He whimpered softly, his body shivering despite the warmth of the fire. Panic surged through her. She couldn't lose Scar, not after all they had been through. "We need to take him to the vet," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. The vet visit confirmed their worst fears. Scar was suffering from a severe intestinal infection, requiring immediate treatment and hospitalization. The vet explained the risks, the potential complications, and the hefty cost of the procedures. Sarah's heart sank. She had barely managed to cover their basic expenses, let alone an unexpected vet bill of this magnitude. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice resolute. "Just please save him." The following days were a blur of worry and sleepless nights. Sarah spent every spare moment at the vet clinic, her heart aching at the sight of Scar hooked up to IVs and monitors. Emily and Jacob, their faces etched with worry, clung to each other for comfort, their usual playful banter replaced by a somber silence. To add to their woes, a blizzard swept through the town, forcing the bakery to close temporarily. Sarah's income, already stretched thin, came to a standstill. The bills piled up, the threat of eviction looming over their heads. Desperate, Sarah reached out to Mrs. Peterson, her voice choked with emotion. Mrs. Peterson, ever the pillar of support, listened patiently, her voice soothing and reassuring. "Don't worry, dear," she said. "We'll find a way. We'll rally the community, organize a fundraiser, something. We won't let you lose Scar." True to her word, Mrs. Peterson sprang into action. She contacted the local newspaper, shared Scar's story on social media, and organized a bake sale at the community center. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, messages of support flooded their inbox, and the bake sale was a resounding success. Sarah, overwhelmed by the outpouring of generosity, felt tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She realized that they weren't alone in this fight. Their community, their newfound family, had their backs. The blizzard raged for days, blanketing the town in a thick layer of snow and ice. Schools closed, businesses shut down, and the usually bustling streets fell silent. Inside their little house, the Johnson family huddled together, their anxieties growing with each passing hour. Sarah, unable to work, spent her days pacing the floor, her phone glued to her ear as she tried to navigate the labyrinth of medical bills and overdue notices. Emily and Jacob, their faces pale with worry, took turns sitting by the phone, waiting for updates from the vet clinic. Scar remained hospitalized, his condition fluctuating between hope and despair. One evening, as Sarah was staring out the window at the swirling snow, a knock on the door startled her. She opened it to find Mrs. Peterson, her face bundled in a thick scarf, a casserole dish in her gloved hands. "I thought you might need this," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice muffled by the scarf. "It's my famous chicken pot pie, guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You're a lifesaver." Mrs. Peterson stepped inside, brushing the snow off her coat. "Nonsense, dear," she said. "We're neighbors. We look out for each other." She placed the casserole dish on the table, then reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of envelopes. "These came for you," she said. "Looks like some good news, finally." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She eagerly tore open the envelopes, her hands trembling. One was from the vet clinic, informing her that Scar had turned a corner and was showing signs of recovery. Another was a check from the community fundraiser, enough to cover a significant portion of the medical expenses. And the last one was a letter from a local charity, offering to pay their rent for the next 2 months. Relief washed over Sarah in waves. She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "It's a miracle," she whispered. Mrs. Peterson patted her hand reassuringly. "It's not a miracle, dear," she said. "It's the power of community. People care about you and your family. Never forget that." That night, for the first time in weeks, Sarah slept soundly. The weight on her shoulders felt lighter. The darkness that had enveloped her seemed to lift. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but she also knew they weren't alone. They had each other, they had their community, and they had Scar, their furry guardian angel, fighting his way back to health. The thaw arrived gradually, like a hesitant sigh of relief. The snowdrifts shrank, revealing patches of brown earth and the first tentative shoots of green. With the receding snow came a renewed sense of hope, a feeling that the worst was over. Scar returned home from the vet clinic, thinner and weaker, but with a spark of resilience in his eyes. Emily and Jacob showered him with affection, their laughter filling the house once again. Sarah, though still burdened with financial worries, felt a lightness in her heart she hadn't experienced in months. The bakery reopened, but business was slow. Many families had left town during the blizzard, and those who remained were hesitant to spend money on non-essentials. Sarah's hours were reduced, her income barely enough to cover the mounting bills. One evening, while Sarah was struggling to balance the checkbook, Mrs. Peterson stopped by with a proposition. "I've been thinking," she said, her eyes twinkling, "that your baking skills could be put to better use." She explained that she was organizing a spring festival for the town, a celebration of renewal and community spirit. "We need someone to bake cakes and pastries for the event," she said, "and I can't think of anyone better suited for the job than you." Sarah hesitated. She had never baked for a large-scale event before, and the thought of it was daunting. But she also knew this was an opportunity she couldn't afford to miss. "I'll do it," she said, a surge of determination coursing through her. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Sarah spent every spare moment in the kitchen, her hands covered in flour, her senses filled with the aroma of baking bread and sweet pastries. Emily and Jacob became her enthusiastic assistants, mixing batter, decorating cookies, and offering taste tests. Even Scar, fully recovered now, joined in the fun, his tail wagging excitedly as he sniffed the delicious scents wafting through the house. The spring festival was a resounding success. The town square was filled with laughter and music, the air alive with the scent of freshly baked goods and blooming flowers. Sarah's cakes and pastries were a hit, her stall attracting a constant stream of eager customers. As she watched the townspeople enjoying her creations, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment she had never experienced before. She had faced adversity, she had overcome obstacles, and she had emerged stronger and more resilient. And she had done it with the support of her community, her family, and her furry companion, Scar. A year had passed since the blizzard that had brought both hardship and unexpected blessings. Spring had returned to Wisconsin, painting the landscape in vibrant hues of green and gold. The Johnson family, once teetering on the brink of despair, now stood on solid ground, their lives transformed by the love of a stray dog and the kindness of their community. Sarah's baking business had flourished. What began as a stall at the spring festival had blossomed into a thriving enterprise. With the help of a small business loan and the unwavering support of Mrs. Peterson, Sarah had opened her own bakery, Buddy's Sweet Treats, a cozy haven filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the cheerful chatter of customers. Emily and Jacob, now a year older, had blossomed into confident and compassionate young individuals. Emily, with her artistic flair, had become Sarah's chief decorator, her cakes adorned with intricate designs and whimsical characters. Jacob, ever the entrepreneur, had taken on the role of delivery boy, his bicycle laden with baskets of warm pastries, his cheerful greetings bringing smiles to the faces of their customers. Buddy, the catalyst of their transformation, remained the heart of their family. He had become a local celebrity, his picture adorning the wall of the bakery, his friendly presence greeting customers at the door. He accompanied Sarah on her deliveries, his wagging tail and infectious enthusiasm spreading joy wherever he went. One sunny afternoon, as Sarah was arranging a display of freshly baked cupcakes, a familiar figure stepped into the bakery. It was the vet who had treated Buddy during his illness, a kind-faced man with a gentle demeanor. "I just wanted to stop by and see how Buddy's doing," he said, a warm smile spreading across his face. "He's quite the legend around here," Sarah beamed with pride. "He's doing wonderfully," she said. "He's the heart and soul of our family, and of this bakery." The vet nodded, his eyes twinkling. "I knew he was special the moment I saw him," he said. "He has a certain spark, a resilience that's truly remarkable." He paused, then added, "You know, I've been thinking about getting a dog myself. I've always loved animals, but I never had the time or the space. But seeing Buddy, and seeing how he's changed your lives, has inspired me." Sarah's heart swelled with warmth. "That's wonderful," she said. "There's nothing quite like the love of a dog." As the vet left the bakery, Sarah glanced at Buddy, who was curled up contentedly in a corner, his tail thumping softly against the floor. She smiled, a wave of gratitude washing over her. Buddy, the stray dog found on a freezing Christmas Eve, had not only changed their lives, but had also touched the lives of others, spreading his magic throughout their community. He was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope, love, and resilience could prevail.